Welcome, crew, guys, gals, ghouls, friends, fiends, foes, whoever may be listening out there beyond the Omniverse tonight. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the plazas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in Colorful, Colorado. It is Sunday, October 29th, Monday, October 30th for those of you across the pond and beyond. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in Rockies. So glad that you could join us this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and we are broadcasting live from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. If you're listening live right now, you may be listening to us on KPNL Radio, which you can find at KPNL Radio at kpnl-db.com. You may also find us live on eTalk Radio, which you can find at etalk.tv/radio. While also broadcasting our video live on Twitch as well as YouTube under We Are Paradox Media and Facebook. Tonight's show will be posted on We Are Paradox Media. Feel free to share it with your friends. And feel free to call in this evening with any of your scary stories, spooky encounters, whether it would be with ghosts, aliens, UFOs, anything that's freaky-deaky, creepy, and, spooks out people that you may have shared that with. So, if you'd like to listen in your free time, whether you're working it or working out, feel free to tune in basically under any place that you'd like to listen to your podcast, under WAPM 101, or it could be We Are Paradox Media. It really just depends. Not quite sure what it's posted as everywhere. Hopefully We Are Paradox Media, because that would be the simplest to find. So, as it is story time with me, TessaTNT, we will be reading from Alfred Hitchcock's Monster Museum. Very spooky. It's been pretty cool so far. We've read several stories, and I actually found this little gem at the library. They were giving it away for free, if you can believe that. And so the last story we were on is known as Slime. So, Rupert Barnaby, Jason Buckmice, and Luke Matson have without any doubt perished in the swamp. The anonymous tramp and now began to appear far from being the murderer. There had been only one more victim. By the store, well, he had disappeared, but the other patrol members had found him sitting on the ground near the edge of the swamp in the clutches of a mind-gripping fear which had temporarily at least reduced him to near idiocy. Even after he had been taken home and put to bed, he had refused to loosen his grip on a flashlight, which he squeezed in one hand. When they switched the flashlight off, he screamed, and they had to switch it on again. His story was so mildly melodramatic it could scarcely be accepted by rational minds, and yet they had said as much about Dolores Rell's historical account. When Fred's store was no excitable young girl, he had a reputation for level-headedness, stolidity, and verbal honesty, which was touched with understatement rather than exaggeration. As Chief Underbeck arose and walked up to his car in order to start back to Wharton Swamp, he noticed Old Man Gauss coming down the block. With a sudden thrill of horror, he remembered the eccentric's missing cow. Before the old man came abreast, he slammed the car door and issued crisp directions to the waiting driver. As the car sped away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Old Man Gauss stood grimly motionless on the walk in front of the police headquarters. Old Man Cassandra, Chief Underbeck muttered. The driver shot a swift glance at him and stepped on the gas. Rustling shower of Chief Underbeck arrived back at Wharton Swamp. The adjacent highway was crowded with cars. State police patrol cars, cars of the local curious, and army trucks from Camp Evans. Promptly at 9 o'clock, over 300 soldiers, police, and citizen volunteers, all armed, swung into the swamp to begin a careful search. Shortly after dusk, Most of them had arrived at the sea on the far side of the swamp. Exhausted efforts had netted nothing. One soldier noticed fierce eyes glaring out of a tree. Bagged now, and one of the state policemen had rushed a young bobcat. Someone else had stepped on a copperhead and been treated for snakebite, but there was no sign of a monster, murderous trap, nor any of the missing men. In the face of mounting skepticism, Chief Underbeck stood firm, pointing out that so far as they knew to date, the murderer prowled only at night. He ordered that after a 4-hour rest and meal period, the search could continue. A number of helicopters, which hovered over the area during the afternoon, landed on the strip of the shore, bringing food and supplies. At Chief Underbeck's assistance, barriers were set up on the beach. Guards were stationed along the entire length of the highway. Powerful searchlights were brought up. Another truck from Camp Evans arrived with a portable machine gun and several flamethrowers. That would be interesting to see. Break out the flamethrowers, boys! By 11 o'clock that night, the stage was set. The beach barriers were in place, guards were at station, and huge searchlights erected near the highway swept the dismal marsh with probing cones of light. At 11:15, the night patrols, each consisting of 2 strongly armed men, struck into the swamp again. Ravenous with hunger, the hood of horror reared out of the mud at the bottom of the rancid pool and rose towards the surface. Dropping ashore in the darkness, it slid quickly away over the clumps of scattered swamp grass. It was impelled, as always, by savage and enormous hunger. Although hunting in its new environment had been good, its appetite knew no appeasement. The more food it consumed, the more it seemed to require. As it rushed off, alert to the minute vibrations which indicated food, it became aware of various disturbing emanations. Although it was time of darkness in this strange world, the darkness at this usual hunting period was oddly pierced by the monster's hated enemy, light. The food vibrations were stronger than the shape of slime had ever experienced. They were on all sides, powerful and purposeful, moving in many directions, all through the lower layers of puzzling light river darkness. Lifting out of the ooze, the hood of horror floated up a latticework of gnarled swamp snags, and motionless, while drops of muddy water rolled off of its glistening surface and dripped below. The thing's sensory apparatus told it that the nagging streaks of light of darkness were everywhere. David was suspended in the snags like a great filthy carpet coated with slime. A terrible touch of light slashed through the surrounding darkness and burned against it. It immediately loosened its hold on the snags and fell back into the ooze with a mighty plop. Nearby, the vibration suddenly increased in intensity. Maddening streamers of light shot through the darkness on all sides. Baffled and savage, the thing plunged into the ooze and propelled itself in the opposite direction. But this proved to be only a temporary respite. Vibrations redoubled in intensity. The darkness almost appeared riven and pierced by bolts and rivers of light. For the first time in its capable existence, the thing experienced something vaguely akin to fear. The light could not be snatched up and squeezed and smothered to death. It was an alien enemy against which the hood of horror had learned only one defense: flight and hiding. And now, as the world of darkness was torn apart by sudden floods and streamers of light, the monster instinctively sought the refuge afforded by the vast black cradle from which it had climbed. Flinging itself through the swamp, it headed back for sea. The guard patrols stationed along the beach, roused by the sound of gunfire and urgent shouts of warning from the interior of the swamp, stood or knelt with ready weapons as the clamor swiftly approached the sea. The dismal reedy beach lay fully exposed in the harsh glare of searchlights. Waves rolled in towards shore, splashing white crests of foam far up the sands. In the searchlight's illumination, the dark waters glistened with an oily iridescence. The shrill cries increased. The watchers tensed, waiting, and suddenly across the long dreary flats clotted with weed stalks and sunken drifts were burst into view a nightmare shape which froze the shore patrols in their tracks. A thing of slimy blackness, a thing which had no essential shape, no discernible earthly features, rushed through the thorn thickets and into the flats. There was a shape of utter darkness, 1 second a great flapping hood, the next a black viscid pool of living ooze which flowed upon itself, sliding forward with incredible speed. Some of the guards remained rooted where they stood, to overcome with horror, to pull the triggers of their weapons. Others broke the spell of terror and began firing. Bullets from half a dozen rifles tore into the black monster, speeding across the mud flats. As the thing neared the end of the flats and approached the first sand dunes of the open beach, the patrol guards who had flushed it from the swamp broke into the open. One of them paused, bellowing at the beach guards. "It's heading for sea. For God's sake, don't let it escape." The beach guards redoubled their firing, suddenly realizing with a kind of sick horror that the monster was apparently unaffected by the rifle slugs. Without a single pause, it rolled through the last fringe of cattails and flopped onto the sands. As in a hideous nightmare, the guards saw it flap over the near sand dune and slide toward the sea. A moment later, however, they remembered the barbed wire beach barrier, which Chief Underbeck had stubbornly insisted on their erecting. Gaining heart, they closed in, running over the dunes toward the spot where the black horror would strike the wire. Someone in the lead yelled in sudden triumph, "It's caught! It's stuck on the wire!" Searchlights concentrated swaths of light on the barrier. The thing had reached the barbed wire fence and apparently flung itself against the twisted strands. Now it appeared to be hopelessly caught. It twisted and flopped and squirmed like some unspeakable giant jellyfish snared in a fisherman's net. The guards ran forward, sure of their victory. All at once, however, the guard in the lead screamed a wild warning. "It's squeezing through! It's getting away!" In the glare of light, they saw with consternation that the monster appeared to be flowing through the wire like a blob of light, liquid ooze. Ahead lay a few yards of downward slanting beach, and beyond that, rolling breakers of the open sea. There was a collective gasp of horrified dismay as the monster, with a quick forward lurch, squeezed through the barrier. It tilted there briefly, twisting as if a few last threads of itself might still be entangled in the wire. As it moved to disengage itself and run down the wet sands into the Black Sea, one of the guards hurled himself forward until he was almost abreast of the barrier. Sliding to his knees, he aimed at the escaping Hood of Horror. "Hey, Jim. Good to see ya." I'm getting my words backwards. Back and forth. It's pretty nice. A second later, a great searing spout of flame shot from his weapon and burst in a smoky red blossom against the thing on the opposite side of the wire. Black, oily smoke billowed into the night. Ghastly stench flowed over the beach. The guards saw a floating mass of horror away from the barrier. The soldier who aimed the flamethrower held it remorselessly steady. Through a hideous bubble and hissing sound, vast gouts of thick, greasy smoke swirled into the night air, and the indescribable stench became almost unbearable. When the soldier finally shut off the flamethrower, there was nothing in sight except white, hot, glowing wires of the barrier and a big patch of blackened sand. Liquid rays in the mantle of slime and faded light, for the ultimate source of light is fire, the final unknown enemy that even the Black Hood could not drive down and devour. So our next story is the man who sold rope to mules. Go over here and switch this up real quick. Turn this music down just a smidge. Smidgety smidge smidge. Let me see if this is still working. Is this thing on? Okay, it looks like it's working. Goody. All right. The Knowles had a bad reputation, and Mortensen was quite aware of this. But he reasoned correctly enough that cordage must be something for which the Knowles had a long unsatisfied want, and he saw no reason why he should not be the one to sell it to them. What a triumph such a sale would be! The district sales manager might single out Mortensen for special mention at the annual sales force dinner. It would help his sales quota enormously, and after all, it was none of his business what the Knowles used cordage for. Mortensen decided to call on the Knowles on Thursday morning. On Wednesday night, he went through his Manual of Modern Salesmanship, underscoring things. The mental states through which the mind passes in making a purchase, he read, have been catalogued as 1. Arousal of interest, 2. Increase of knowledge, 3. Adjustment to needs. There were 7 mental states listed, and Mortensen underscored all of them. Then he went back and double-scored number 1, arousal of interest, number 4, appreciation of suitability, and number 7, decision to purchase. He turned the page. 2 qualities are of exceptional importance to a salesman, he read. They are adaptability and knowledge of merchandise. Mortensen underlined the qualities. Other highly desirable attributes are physical fitness, high ethical standard, charm of manner, a dogged persistence, and unfailing courtesy. Mortensen underlined these too, but he read on to the end of the paragraph without underscoring anything more. And it may be that his failure to put tact and keen power of observation on a footing with the other attributes of a salesman was responsible for what happened to him. The Knowles live on the very edge of terra cognita, on the far side of a wood which all authorities unite in describing as dubious. The house is narrow and high, in architecture a blend of Victorian Gothic and Swiss chalet. Though the house needs paint, it is kept in good repair. Thither on Tuesday morning, sample case in hand, Mortensen took his way. No path leads to the house of the Knowles, and it is always dark in that dubious wood. But Mortensen, remembering what he had learned at his mother's knee concerning the odor of Knowles, found the house quite easily. For a moment he stood hesitating before it. His lips moved as he repeated, "Good morning, I have come to supply your cordage requirements," to himself. The words were the beginning of his sales talk. Then he went up and rapped on the door. The Knowles were watching him through the holes they had bored in the trunks of trees. It is an artful custom of theirs to which the prime authority on Knowles attests. Mortensen's knock almost threw them into confusion. It was so long since anyone had knocked at their door. Then the senior Knoll, the one who never leaves the house, went flitting up from the cellars and opened it. The senior Knoll is a little like a Jerusalem artichoke made of India rubber, and he has small red eyes which are faceted in the same way that gemstones are. Mortensen had been expecting something unusual, and when the Knoll opened the door, he bowed politely, took off his hat, and smiled. He had got past the sentence about cordage requirements and into an enumeration of the different types of cordage his firm manufactured when the Knoll, by turning his head to the side, showed him that he had no ears. Nor was there anything on his head which could take their place in the conduction of sound. Then the Knoll opened his little fanged mouth and let Mortensen look at his narrow, ribbony tongue. As a tongue, it was no more fit for human speech than was a serpent's. Judging from his appearance, the Knoll could not safely be assigned to any of the four characterological types mentioned in the manual, and for the first time, Mortensen felt a definite qualm. So here's Mr. Mortensen knocking at the Knoll's door. This art is pretty interesting in this book. I must say so myself. Nonetheless, he followed the Knoll unhesitatingly when the creature motioned him within. Adaptability, he told himself. Adaptability must be his watchword. Enough adaptability, and his knees might even lose their tendency to shakiness. It was the parlor of the Knoll led him to, and Mortensen's eyes widened as he looked around it. There were whatnots in the corners and cabinets of curiosities, and on the fretwork table an album with gilded hasps. Who knows whose pictures were in it? All around the walls and brackets were, in lesser houses, the people display ornamental plates were emeralds as big as your head. The Knolls set great store by their emeralds. All the light in the dim room came from them. Mortensen went through the phrases of his sales talk mentally. This stressed him that was the only way he could go through them. Still, adaptability. The Knoll's interest was already aroused, or he would never have asked Mortensen into the parlor. And as soon as the Knoll saw the various cordages the sample case contained, he would no doubt proceed of his own accord through appreciation of suitability to desire to possess. Sorry, my thing was up on the tab there. I think I was trying to turn it off. Mortensen sat down in the chair the Knoll indicated and opened his sample case. He got out the Heliquin cable-laid rope, an assortment of ply and yarn goods, and some superlative slender abaca fiber rope. He even showed the Knoll a few short yarns and twines made of cotton and jute. On the back of an envelope, he wrote prices for hanks and cheeses of the twines and for 50 and 100-foot lengths of the ropes. Laboriously, he added details about the strength, durability, and resistance to climatic conditions of each sort of cord. The senior Knoll watched him intently, putting his little feet on the top rung of his chair and poking at the facets of his left ply now and then with a tentacle. In the cellars, from time to time, someone would scream. Well, I wonder who that was. Mortensen began to demonstrate his wares. He showed the Knoll the slip and resilience of one rope, the tenacity and stubborn strength of another. He cut a tarred hemp rope in two and laid a 5-foot piece on the parlor floor to show the Knoll how absolutely neutral it was, with no tendency to untwist of its own accord. He even showed the Knoll how nicely some of the cotton twines made up in square knotwork. They settled at last on 2 ropes of abaca fiber, 3/16 and 5/8 inch in diameter. The Knoll wanted an enormous quantity. Mortensen's comment on those ropes' unlimited strength and durability seemed to have attracted him. Soberly, Mortensen wrote the particulars down in his order book, but ambition was setting his brain on fire. The Knolls, it seemed, would be regular customers, and after the Knolls, why should he not try the Giblins? They too must have a need for rope. Mortensen closed his order book. On the back of the same envelope he wrote, for the Knoll to see, the delivery would be made within 10 days. Terms were 30% with order, balance upon receipt of goods. The senior Knoll hesitated. Shyly he looked at Mortensen with his little red eyes. Then he got down the smallest of the emeralds from the wall and handed it to him. The sales representative stood weighing it in his hands. It was the smallest of the Knoll's emeralds, but it was as clear as water, as green as grass. In the outside world, it would have ransomed a Rockefeller or a whole family of Guggenheims. A legitimate profit from a transaction was one thing, but this was another. A high ethical standard. Any kind of ethical standard would forbid Mortensen to keep it. He waited a moment longer. Then, with a deep, deep sigh, he gave the emerald back. He cast a glance around the room to see if he could find something which would be more negotiable. And in an evil moment, he fixed on the senior Knoll's auxiliary eyes. What? The senior Knoll keeps his extra pair of optics on the third shelf of the curiosity cabinet with the glass doors. They look like fine dark emeralds about the size of the end of your thumb. And if the Knolls in general set store by their gems, it is nothing at all compared to the senior Knoll's emotions about his extra eyes. The concern good Christian folk should feel for their soul's welfare is a shadow, a figment, nothing compared to what the thoroughly heathen Knoll feels for those eyes. He would rather, I think, choose to be a mere miserable human being than that same vandal should lay hands upon him. If Mortensen had not been elated by his success to the point of anesthesia, he would have seen the Knoll stiffen. He would have heard him hiss. When he went over to the cabinet, all innocent, Mortensen opened the glass door, took the twin eyes out, and juggled them sacrilegiously in his hand. The Knoll could feel them clink. Smiling to evince the charm of manner advised in the manual, and raise his brows as one who says, "Thank you, these will do nicely." Mortensen dropped the eyes into his pocket. The Knoll growled. The growl awoke Mortensen from his trance of euphoria. It was a growl whose meaning no one could mistake. This was clearly no time to be doggedly persistent. Mortensen made a break for the door. The senior Knoll was there before him, his network of tentacles outstretched. He caught Mortensen in them easily and wound them, flat as bandages, around his ankles and his hands. The best abaca fiber is no stronger than those tentacles, though the Knolls would find rope a convenience. They get along very well without it. Would you, dear reader, go naked if zippers should cease to be made? Growling indignantly, the Knoll fished his ravished eyes from Mortensen's pockets and then carried him down to the cellar, to the fattening pens. Yummy! Great are the virtues of legitimate commerce, though they fattened Mortensen sedulously, and later roasted and sauced him and ate him with real appetite. The Knolls slaughtered him in quite a humane manner, and never once thought of torturing him. That is unusual for Knolls. And they ornamented the plank on which they served him with a beautiful border of fancy knotwork made of cotton cord from his own sample case. That'll learn him to go try to sell stuff to the Knolls and then try to take his extra pair of eyeballs? What's wrong with this guy? Alright, moving right along to our next story. Henry Martindale, Great Dane. This one is by Miriam Allen DeFord. Who is this last story by? Idris Seabright was the last writer. What woke Linda was being hit on the nose with a pajama button. She opened her eyes abruptly. It was just barely light. She turned sleepily, took one look at the other side of the double bed, and let out a screech. The thing lying there opened its eyes, Henry's eyes, and said in Henry's voice, "What's the matter, honey?" It wasn't Henry, though. It was a Great Dane in Henry's pajamas, with the top buttons popped off by its barrel chest. Lita shot out of bed. She got as far as the door before it occurred to her that she might be the one who had gone crazy. Trembling, she inched back and took another look. Like, what the heck is that? It was Great Dane, all right. You look like a dog, she managed to gasp. Henry, or whatever was there, took it calmly. Henry always took everything calmly. Are you just calling me a so-and-so in a nice way, or is something wrong with your eyes? Lita made a tremendous effort and pulled herself together. Ordinarily, she was almost as calm as Henry. It isn't my eyes, she breathed. Either I've lost my mind or something awful has happened to you. Look at yourself. Henry, and tell me what it is. Henry's myopic blue eyes inspected his arm, his foreleg, well, his upper limb. Can't see a thing without my glasses. Give them to me, honey. Something does feel funny. Bring me your hand mirror, too. The glasses wouldn't go on Henry's new broad nose. Lita held them with one shaking hand and passed over the mirror with the other. There was a long silence. You're not crazy, Lita, Henry said at last. Something's happened. Lita was speechless. Yeah. So, what do you mean?
I think Kung is hurt.
Well, where's Dad?
Making his guitar. I don't think he minds about it.
What's he doing?
Making it.
No, what's Kung doing?
He's waiting for upstairs in the signs. Whenever I get closer, he starts meowing. I tried to make him.
Oh, can you check their water?
I tried to think about him doing plays, and then he started hissing.
Okay, can you check their water?
Yeah.
I'll check on him on break. There's something wrong with Kung Pao. My Siamese cat. Kung Pao kitten. I hope he's alright. I'm so glad I can rub my nose. Oh, thank you, Truzido. Yeah, I couldn't find my regular witch dress that I bought last year. I couldn't even find my skeleton costume. I don't know where the heck they went. So yeah, I'm wearing my Elvira dress. It fits pretty good. Well, thank you, Truzido. Thank you so much. Lita was speechless. Even Henry was shaken. He didn't drop the mirror, but he laid it down with a distinct thump. Perhaps it was because he had been holding it in the crook of his limb.
His water is full.
Okay. I'll check on him on break. Thanks, boy. He no longer had an opposable thumb with which to grasp it. Unquestionably, what he now had was a large dog's paw. Shades of Kafka, he said.
Did you see the bass strings that were on the table?
No. Nova's the one that cleaned off the table, so it could be in that box. Can you check on Kung? Floyd said something's wrong with him. Sorry, guys. Looks like nobody can read the sign on my door that says, do not come in between the hours of 7 and 10. Guitar strings. Shades of Kafka, he said in an odd tone. Thank God I didn't turn into a giant cockroach. But what? How do I know? Things do happen. I've been trying for years to get you to take Charles Fort seriously. He has records of strange things. Stranger things than this. Lita burst into tears. Don't cry, honey. He put out a comforting paw. But she shrank from it involuntarily. Fortunately for his feelings, Henry didn't see that. His glasses had fallen off as soon as she let go of them. Well, we'll have to figure things out and use our common sense, he said, in the reasonable tone she had been listening to for 8 years. Common sense? What has common sense to do with this unbelievably horrible? Hysteria won't help. Horrible maybe, but not unbelievable because it has happened. And when a thing is real, we have to believe it. He climbed laboriously out from under the bedclothes, hesitated a moment, his hind paws hovering over his slippers, then stood solidly on all fours. The pajama pants fell down. Solemnly he peered at himself and Lita's full-length pier glass. I can't get a good look this way. Find some adhesive tape and fasten my glasses on for me, will you, Lita? And take this pajama top off me. It's inappropriate. In a waking nightmare, Lita did as she was told. Henry took a long look. A great Dane, he murmured. I wonder why. I never cared for them particularly. It cost too much to feed. Well, let's get down to cases. He glanced helplessly at the pad and pencil which always stood on the night table on his side of the bed. Until this morning, Henry Martindale had been a reasonably prosperous radio and television scriptwriter. I can't think without notes, Lita, he sighed. Write down what I tell you, and I'll try to reason this thing out, but put on your dressing gown first, dear, or you'll freeze. This evidence of husbandly concern transformed Lita's horror into passionate loyalty and love. Somewhere within this canine shape, her own Henry lived intact. Suppose it had happened to her instead. Suppose she had awakened to find herself a Pekingese or a Siamese cat or a parakeet. Could she doubt that Henry would have stood by her? She reached for her dressing gown, wrapped herself in it, and took up the pad and pencil. At his dictation, she began to write the first considered reflections of Henry Martindale, Great Dane. 1, he began. This is either temporary or permanent. If it is temporary, I may wake up as myself tomorrow morning. In any event, I can manage to wait for a week with your cooperation, Lita. She nodded and even contrived to smile. For a week without arousing suspicion, call up everybody we had engagements with and tell them I have the flu. Tell Mrs. Woozies the same thing when she comes to clean and keep her out of this room. I'll have a deadline on that story for Channel 20, but I can dictate it as usual and you can deliver it. You'd better do all the phoning, too. I could talk, but I doubt if I could hold the phone. Lita hid her shudder. Henry went on dictating. 2. If this condition is permanent, if it isn't gone in a week or so, then it may mean that I must face my remaining lifespan as a Great Dane. Question. Have I now the life expectancy of a human being or of a dog? Excuse me. I must then make a major decision. Where and how can I live? I've earned my living for 15 years now as a writer. I could continue to dictate my stories, of course, but it would be utterly impossible to conceal my present appearance. It would be still more impossible to explain it, even to such hardened sophisticates as the script editors and agency men for whom I write. As for the family, my brother and Aunt Agatha and your mother, Lita, and the rest of your relatives, I could perhaps brazen it out and make advantageous connections with the television program. I won't have that, Lita burst out hotly. I won't have you displaying yourself as an intelligent talking dog might be worth big money to the right sponsor, Henry said reasonably. No, they'd investigate first, and you couldn't get away with it anyway. Henry, your eyes, they're still yours, and people would wonder. And your voice, you've talked too often in public and on the air. Perhaps you're right. It might be too risky, even though it would have been rather fun. Well then, if I'm stuck for an infinite period with this phenomenon, there will be only one thing I can do. We must go somewhere where we know nobody, where you can be a widow who lives alone with her only dog for company. He paused. Wait a moment, Lita. No, don't write this down. Maybe I'm assuming too much. I'm taking it for granted that you'll be with me. No, let me finish. If you feel you can't stand it, if you want to go away, I'll understand. I never blame you, and Lita, I beg of you, don't stick by me out of a sense of duty. Just because a dog without an owner, even a dog that can think and talk, is a lost dog just because. He had to stop. His throat tightened too much for him to go on. Lita's last vestige of horror left her. Don't be a fool, darling, she said abruptly. I married you, not your looks. You're still here. If we have to go to the ends of earth, if I have to pretend forever that you're my pet Great Dane, she gulped down a sob. Just so we're together. Thanks, Adrian. Yes, getting close to Halloween. Only 2 days left. I guess the kids were up all night, eating candy. Bless you, dearest, Henry said quietly. He had recovered his usual calm. Go on taking this down now. We won't have to go to the ends of the earth. We can find some secluded place in the country, perhaps not more than 100 miles from here. We'll have to think of ways to fend off our families and friends. But I can dictate my stories to you, and we can handle all of my business contacts by mail. There will be difficulties, of course. How can I sign letters or endorse checks, for instance? I can forge your signature. I've done it before on letters, when you were deep in a story and didn't want to be disturbed. Yes, that would work, and we'll find means to solve the other problems as they come up. All we need to face now is a week of waiting to see if this transformation is permanent. Could you imagine turning into a Great Dane? That would be so weird. I can actually, scratch my nose tonight instead of being worried about getting all that black stuff all over me. That's a point. A thought occurred to Lita. About food, Henry, she suggested nervously. Do you want to eat as usual, or should I buy some canine delight? That's a point. Henry let his mind dwell on ham and eggs, then on canine delight. I'm sorry, dear, he said apologetically, but I'm afraid you'd better lay in a supply of dog food. It's 8 o'clock. The grocery store at the corner will be open. I'll dress and go out to get some breakfast for you, and here, I'll fasten your glasses on firmly so you can read the paper while I'm gone. Just don't pedal on it. Already, she discovered gratefully, she was becoming accustomed to the new Henry. Her hands were steady as she adjusted the tape. She restrained an impulse to stroke the tawny head. Henry watched her leave, his large myopic blue eyes moist. He had not mentioned the fear that gnawed at him, a fear worse than a bite of hunger. Suppose this were an intermediate stage. Suppose he should gradually become more dog and less man. Lose his power of speech, his power of human thought? Time enough to face that if it began to happen. Time probably to run away alone into the unknown before she could stop him. Fortunately, all they possessed was in their joint names, and ultimately, Lita would have to let him be declared dead and cash in on his sizable insurance. He gazed unseeingly at the paper most of the time while she was gone. Nothing in it was as strange as what had happened to Henry Martindale. The week went by somehow. Every night, Henry went to sleep, a Great Dane. He admitted he was more comfortable sleeping on a rug beside the bed, and every morning he woke up a Great Dane again. He ate canine delight, and one night when Lita broiled 2 pork chops for herself, he enjoyed the juicy bones. But he felt no impulse to wag his tail or to bark. Inside, he was still completely Henry. They devised a strap to hold his spectacles on, to avoid the pulling of hair that accompanied removing the adhesive tape. Physically, he was comfortable, though he began to long for exercise and fresh air. He could stand anything for a week, even Aunt Agatha's insistence that she must come to help nurse the poor boy, plus her resentment of Lita's firm refusal. Once there was a scare when the woman who came twice a week to clean insisted that she could vacuum the bedroom without bothering the invalid, but Lita won that round. At the end of the week, it became obvious that the metamorphosis was either permanent or would be of infinite duration. Henry had met his deadline and dictated the beginning of another story in his television series, but he felt distracted and uninterested. So here's a picture. Look at poor Mr. Henry Martindale, Great Dane, reading the paper. Hello. Hello. Who's this? Hello. Did you have a scary story to share? This is Bob. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm feeling kind of sad.
Unfortunately, I can't understand what you're saying.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm feeling kind of sad.
Oh, what's wrong?
I'm having trouble getting it up.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Better luck next time. So, I'm pretty sure he didn't say I'm having trouble getting up. I think he said he's having trouble getting it up. Weird. Weird indeed. Poor guy. Better luck next time. So, Lita, her huge dog in the back seat, began visiting rural real estate offices to inquire about secluded cottages for rent. There was no sense in typing up their capital by buying a house, when at any moment, as they still assured each other, this calamity might end and Henry be himself again. All they got was turndowns. There was nothing, simply nothing, to be had. Villagers, they learned, don't rent their homes. They had reached a state of dull despair when, almost the last on their hopeful list, they drove to Farmington. Yes, said Mr. Bolus, there was one place, the old Gassingham house. It was a kind of bad shape, needed some work done, and it was 3 miles from the highway. But Liz Gassingham, she was all that was left. She lived in town now, and she refused to sell. She'd never said she'd rent, but she might. Lita almost said she would take it, sight unseen, but stopped herself in time. There's only one thing, Mrs. Martindale, that dog of yours. He cast an unfriendly eye on Henry, lying peaceably on the floor of the real estate office. You mean Miss Gassingham wouldn't let me keep a pet? Pet, yes, but pets to Liz is cats. She mightn't like the idea of a tenant with a dog, a monster dog like that especially. Mr. Bolus, I told you, I'm all alone since my husband went. Lita's voice shook. The doctor said I must go to the country to get back my strength. but I'd be afraid to live so far from people without Henry to protect me. That his name, Henry? Henry laid a warning paw on her foot. They had agreed that they must keep their own name because of the mail, and Suze remembered that most of the letters would be addressed to Henry. It's silly, perhaps you'll think it's crazy, but that was my husband's name. It makes me feel less lonely to call the dog Henry, too. He went so suddenly. Mr. Bullis sounded disapproving. Well, let's go see Liz. Put the mutt in your car. He might talk her over, but not if she saw him first. Funny-looking dog at that, if you don't mind my saying so. Awful funny-looking eyes. Will he make a row if you leave him? Oh, no, Henry never... Great Danes don't bark much. Better lock him in. If the kids spot him, they'll be all over him, and you don't want him jumping out. Henry settled down, philosophically, in the car and took a nap. Lita came back triumphant. I told her you were a settled old dog, Henry, too lazy to do any damage, she announced, and that you were clean and never had fleas and just loved cats. Gosh, said Mr. Bullis, staring. You talked to that mutt just like he was a human. Lita tried to smile it off. That's what being alone does to people, Mr. Bullis. The house was pretty dreadful. It was big and watertight, but that was about all that could be said for it. Their modern furniture would look weird in it. The only lighting was by kerosene lamps. The water came from an outdoor pump. Henry wondered dismally if he could learn to pump with his mouth. The sanitary arrangements consisted of an outhouse in the backyard, and the cooking had to be done on a wood stove with a fireplace for central heating. But they had to leave it, and they could get along somehow. At least Mr. Bullis said Lita could hire Ed Monahan to chop wood and do the heavy chores there as old Mrs. Starp. She sometimes took on washing for the summer people, and she might be willing to do Mrs. Martindale's household laundry. He looked despairingly at Lita's city-bred slenderness. A month later, all the lies had been told, all the arrangements had been made, and Lita and Henry were residents of Farmington. It was pretty rugged. Henry had to be careful and make sure his spectacles were off whenever anyone came to the house, but they managed. His mind had never been working better, and he dictated scripts like mad till he had a good backlog in several agency inventories. Smith of DDB and I wrote him that if rusticating for their health would add the same touch of originality and conviction to other writers' stuff, he'd recommend it to all his regulars. Henry twitched his ears irascibly when he read that one. In a way, it was Lita who unwittingly brought in the invitation and inevitable crisis. It was an evening in early November. She was sitting by the fireplace knitting a sweater for Henry, who was lying contentedly at her feet. Henry had become almost reconciled to being a dog. It was nice not having to wear clothes, for instance, though when really cold weather came, he would probably want a sweater. He wished he could help Lita more with the housework, but there aren't many household tasks that can be done without hands. So on that note, let's go to our first music break. You're gonna love this one. Of course, tonight we have Miss Mia Savage with her band Antidote for Savages, and she will be singing Lemurian Crypto, Your Skeleton, Our New Reality, and Let Me Be Your Home. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
or leave me alone. Somebody please take me out. Rest of time. Not if you
back, and thanks so much for joining me tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. More story time with me, TessaTNT. We have The Monster Museum by Alfred Hitchcock. I used to love watching Alfred Hitchcock when I was a kid. Creepy, very creepy. Let's see, where were we? It was pretty rugged. Henry had to be careful and make sure his spectacles were off when anyone would come to the house. In a way, it was Lita who unwittingly brought on the inevitable crisis. It was an evening in early November. She was sitting by the fireplace knitting a sweater for Henry. Suddenly, Lita said, "Henry, I've been thinking. So I've noticed." "What about?" he countered. "I've been thinking about it." It was what they had tactically agreed to call Henry's transmogrification. Transmogrification? What's the use in thinking about it? That's just what I mean. You're just taking it lying down. Henry rose to his feet and looked at her apologetically. "Don't be silly," she said impatiently. "I don't mean that way. I mean, you've just accepted it. You haven't tried to think how or why it happened or whether there's any way to undo it. Did the swan that was found in Central Park try to figure out how it could become Dorothy Arnold again?" Henry inquired sententiously. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a Fortean phenomenon." He never said anything about the possibility of reversal. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen. Perhaps not. My guess is it would have to be spontaneous, but if it will make you any happier, Lita, I'll try anything you suggest. Henry, don't you want to be human again? Because you're human? Yes. But selfishly, I confess, so long as I have the mind and the power of speech of a human being. That's one of the things I've been wondering about. A dog's throat and mouth aren't formed for human speech, but you can talk clearly with your own voice. I know, I've been puzzled about that too. And my sight. Dogs have a very good sight anyway, so that might fit, but they're supposed to be colorblind, and I'm not any more than I ever was. I know very well that sweater you're knitting is beige and maroon. What about your other senses? Well, I always had good hearing, and I still have, but certainly don't have the sense of smell of a dog, or other dogs, I mean. Don't say that. I'm sorry, I get sort of confused sometimes, and there are other disadvantages, of course, but Lita, there's no use in going into all that. I don't know how to change it. Let me turn this music down a little bit. Just a smidge. It doesn't look too loud, but we'll just give it a few little clinks down there. Tell me, can you remember anything special about that night, the night before it happened? I've tried. I remember I was working late on a script. It was nearly 2 when I went to bed, and you were sound asleep. The last thing I recall was thinking, I'm dog-tired. And then you woke me, and it was morning, and I was like this. Dog-tired, do you think? Nonsense, pure coincidence, or maybe. Henry felt sudden excitement thrill through him, from head to tail. All his calm acceptance dropped from him as his pajamas had once done. Lita, you just remembered. The story I was working on that night was the one about a werewolf who evolved from a primitive wolf-like creature instead of from apes like us. Lita stared at him. You mean... Could be. Perhaps that story wasn't just imaginary. Perhaps it happened on actual facts and got transformed as a warning. Maybe that's how people turn into werewolves. Then there might be a way for you to change back again. I don't see how. I didn't engineer it and wouldn't know how to engineer the reversal. I'd have to get in touch somehow with a real werewolf. Well, here's an idea. Let's get to work on another story about werewolves. It might be like tuning them in. if they really exist, and perhaps my transformer would get on my beam again. You might be glad to straighten me out. But suppose he isn't. You're not altogether sorry about being a dog. You just told me so. Suppose he decides you like being a pet, with no responsibilities. That's not fair, honey. Henry's tone was aggrieved. Don't I work just as hard as I ever did? Oh, darling, I didn't mean you, just him. In that case, he won't want to change me back and everything will stay the way it is. Now, what else could he do to me? Henry began dictating the new werewolf script, and the next morning it went fast and smoothly, as if something in him knew beforehand what to say. Yet neither of them felt comfortable. He said nothing to Lita, but under the flow of words he was conscious of an inner struggle, as though something or somebody were trying vainly to impede them. And she, though the original incitement had been her own, grew increasingly nervous and apprehensive. At the end of 3 hours, the script was half done, and both of them were exhausted. Let's knock off for the rest of the day, Henry suggested. We can go on with it tomorrow. We both need exercise. I'd like to explore those thick woods, and ones we've never gone into. Nothing could have been more trim, tame, and civilized than Farmington. Yet not 5 miles from the village in the back country lay the last remnants of what was once virgin forest. Its trees were of no value as timber, and it had a bad reputation. There were said to be wildcats there, even bears. Parts of it belonged to landowners, who never bothered with it. Parts of it still in public domain. Local stories made it the hideout of robbers in the past, and children were disciplined by threats of taking them there and leaving them. Lita took Henry's spectacles off of him and put on his collar and leash. Passing through the village in the car, they encountered Liz Gassingham, who scarcely returned Lita's greeting and snorted at the sight of Henry. Great horrible thing, she muttered, glaring. If she ever lets it loose to hurt my kitties, I'll throw her out, lease or no lease. They parked the car at the end of the road and walked half a mile over fields to the edge of the wood. Once inside, Lita shrank back a little. Henry, she said, do you think there really are wild animals here? Let's not go too far. Henry couldn't smile anymore, but he laid a protecting paw on her hand. The Great Dane, he said soothingly, was originally a boarhound. I can handle anything we're likely to meet, and we won't get lost. Don't forget, I have the canine sense of direction. Can't explain it, Lita, but all day I've felt impelled toward these woods, he said. Maybe something is going to happen here, said Lita hopefully. Oh, darling, if it only would. You do want it, too, don't you? I want us to be alike again, dearest. They walked for an hour among the old trees, and Henry ran eagerly from tree to tree, sniffing. They startled woodchucks and squirrels, but nothing larger appeared. It was very quiet and peaceful, and not too cold, even with the trees bare and patches of early snow left here and there on the ground from the first fall of the season. After a while, they found themselves climbing until the level floor of the woods had become a hill. Suddenly, Henry darted through some underbrush toward a depression in the hillside, behind the bulk of a huge uprooted tree. You know, he called back in a voice that shook a little, this could be dug out to make a good snug cave. I could do it myself with my paws. What of it? You don't want to live in a cave, do you? I suppose not. The excitement deserted him. I'm all confused. There's something very important I was thinking about, and now I seem to have forgotten it completely. Poor Henry, you're tired. Let's go back. I'm tired, too. I guess it was all nonsense about werewolves after all, said Henry in the car. Well, it's a pretty good story anyway. The agency ought to eat it up. You know, darling, I just remembered. Vampires turn people they bite into their own kind. Why not werewolves? But you're a were-dog, said Lita absently. Then sharply, Henry, you wouldn't. Just one little nip, darling. After we get home, of course. When rent day came around, Lita didn't turn up at Liz Gassingham's house. Mrs. Sharp had a whole washing ready that Lita never called for. Ed Monahan went out to chop wood, but found nobody home. Mail piled up in the post office, and the postmistress noticed, as so often before, that most of it was addressed to the deceased Mr. Martindale. Why, she wondered loudly, didn't the woman tell his friends he had passed away, or deserted her, more likely? Something funny there. But nobody moves fast in Farmington, and over a week passed before the delegation, led by Mr. Bullis, went out to investigate. The door was unlocked and the house was empty. Everything was in order, with the table laid for breakfast, and the stove stuffed with wood and paper, ready to light. The bed had been slept in, and at its foot, where apparently that dog slept on a rug, lay a white flannel nightgown frivolously printed with sprigs of roses. All its buttons were off. The rest of Lita's usual house attire lay over the back of a chair. Her shoes were beneath it, a pair of pink bedroom slippers beside the bed. In the living room, they found a partly knitted maroon and beige sweater, evidently intended for a dog, and beside a typewriter, a pile of manuscript. Nobody ever saw Lita Martindale again. It was a year from the following summer that two adventurous boys from the village, egging each other on, raided the big woods. They came back pale and frightened to report that they had seen the dog that used to belong to Mrs. Martindale. It had emerged from the thick underbrush, they said, where the slope of the ground began to climb the hill. It had gone back to the wild, the boys claimed, and they had been lucky to get away without harm. You might have been killed. Somebody ought to go out there and shoot the thing, Mr. Bullis asserted. "Ah," said the older of the two, aged 15, looking a bit sick. "Wasn't doing nobody no hurt. Nobody hardly ever goes there anyhow. I know I ain't going no more." "There was a she-dog, too, just like him, and some puppies," the younger boy blurted out. "Shut up," growled the older. "You want folks to think you're crazy." Jim was so scared he got to seeing things, Mr. Bullis. There wasn't nothing there except the big mud of Mrs. Martindale's. "I wasn't scared," Jim retorted. He caught his friend's eye and added hastily, "But I could have made a mistake." "You must have, my boy," said Mr. Bullis kindly. "The dog was a Great Dane, and there's never been another anywhere around here that I'd ever heard of." "You idiot!" the 15-year-old scolded when the two boys were alone again. "Don't you ever open your yap about that again. They'd put us both in the booby hatch." They kept far from the woods after that, and gradually they became convinced that there must have been out of their heads for a while. How could a dog have yelled, "Scram, you kids! Or do you want me to bite?" This next story is called The Microscopic Giants by Paul Ernst. It happened toward the end of the Great War, which was an indirect cause. You'll find mention of it in the official records filed at Washington. Curious reading some of those records. Among them are accounts of incidents so bizarre, freak accidents, and odd discoveries, fringing war activities, that the filing clerks must have raised their eyebrows skeptically before they buried them in the steel cabinets to remain unread for the rest of time. But this particular one will never be buried in oblivion for me, because I was on the spot when it happened, and I was the one who sent the report. Spur. A war-worn world was famished for it. The thunder of guns from the Arctic to the Antarctic, and from the Pacific to the Atlantic and back again, drummed for it. Equipment behind the lines demanded it, statesmen lied for it, and national bankers ran up bills that would never be paid to get it. Copper, copper, copper! Every obscure mine in the world was worked to capacity. Men risked their lives to salvage fragments from battlefields 1,000 miles away. And still not enough copper was available. Up in the Lake Superior region, we had gone down 31,000 feet for it. And then, in answer to the enormous prices being paid for copper, we'd sink a shaft of 40,500 feet, where we struck a vein of almost pure ore. And it was shortly after this that my assistant, a young mining engineer named Belmont, came into my office, his eyes afire with the light of discovery. "We've uncovered the greatest archaeological find since the days of Rosetta Stone," he announced bluntly. "Down in the new low level. I want to phone the Smithsonian Institution at once. There may be a war on, but the professors will forget all about war when they see this." Jim Belmont was apt to be overenthusiastic, under 30, a tall, good-looking chap, with light blue eyes looking lighter than they really were in a tanned, lean face. He sometimes overshot his mark by leaping before he looked. "Wait a minute," I said. "What have you found? Prehistoric bones? Some new kind of fossil monster?" "Not bones," said Belmont, fidgeting toward the control board that dialed our private number to Washington on the radio telephone. "Footprints. Freighter. Fossil footsteps." "You mean men's footprints?" I demanded, frowning. The rock formation at the 40,000-foot level was age-old. The Pleistocene era had not occurred when those rocks were formed. Impossible. But I tell you, they're down there. Footprints preserved in the solid rock. Men's footprints. They antedate everything ever thought of in the age of man. Belmont drew a deep breath. More than that, he almost whispered. They are prints of shod men, Frank. The men who made those prints millions of years ago wore shoes. We've stumbled on traces of civilization that existed long before man was supposed to have evolved on this earth at all. His whisper reverberated like a shout. Such was its great import. But I still couldn't believe it. Prints of men at the 40,000-foot level, and prints of shod feet at that. If they're prints of feet with shoes on them, I said, they might be simply prints of our own workmen's boots. If the Smithsonian man got up here and found that, a laugh would go that would ruin us. No, said Belmont, that's impossible. You see, these prints are those of little men. I hadn't told you before, had I? I guess I'm pretty excited. The men who made these prints were small, hardly more than 2 feet high. If the size of their feet can be taken as a true gauge, the prints are hardly more than 3 inches long. Where did you happen to see them? I asked. Near the concrete we poured to fill in the rift we uncovered at the far end of the level. Some of the workmen may have been playing a trick. Confounded skepticism, Belmont cried. Tricks, perhaps they're prints of our own men. Didn't I tell you prints were preserved in solid rock? Do you think a workman would take the trouble to carve, most artistically, a dozen footprints 3 inches long in solid rock? Or that if we had any men with feet that small, their feet would sink into the rock for half an inch or more? I tell you, these are fossil prints made millions of years ago, when the rock was mud, and preserved when the rock hardened. And I tell you, I replied a little hotly, that it's all impossible. As I supervised the pouring of that concrete, and I would have noticed if there were prints. Suppose you come down and look, said Belmont. After all, that's the one sure way to finding out if what I say is true. I reached for my hat. Seeing for myself was the one way of finding out if Belmont had gone off half-cocked again. It takes a long time to go down 40,000 feet. We hadn't attempted to speed up the drop too much. At such great depths, there are abnormalities of pressure and temperature to which the human machine takes time to become accustomed. By the time we'd reached the new low level, I'd persuaded myself and Belmont let's surely be mad. But having come this far, I went through with it, of course. Fossil prints of men who could not have been more than 2 feet high, shot in civilized fashion, preserved in rock at 40,000-foot level. It was ridiculous. We got near the concrete fill at the end of the tunnel, and I pushed the problem of prints out of my mind for a moment while I examined its blank face. Rearing that slanted concrete wall had presented some particular problems. As we had bored in, even farther under the thick skin of Mother Earth, we'd come to a rock formation that had no right to exist there at all. It was a layer of soft, mushy stuff, with gaping cracks in it, slanting down somewhere toward the bowels of the earth, like a soft strip of marrow or hard bone that lay between dense, compressed masses of solid rock. And we had put 10 feet of concrete over its face to avoid cave-ins. Concrete is funny stuff. It acts differently in different pressures and temperatures. The concrete we'd poured here, where atmospheric pressure made a man gasp, and the temperature was above 118 in spite of cooling systems, quite acted at all like any I'd ever seen before. It seemed to harden as well as it should, and it still rayed out perceptible, self-generated heat in the pressure surrounding it. It seemed to be serving its purpose all right, though it was as soft as cheese compared to the rock around it. "Here," said Belmont, pointing down in the bright light of the raw electric bulbs stringing along the level. "Look." I looked and got a shock that I could still feel. A half-inch or so deep in the rock floor of the level at that base of concrete retained wall, there were footprints. Oddest, tiniest things imaginable. Jim Belmont had said they were 3 inches long, if anything had ever overstated their size. I don't think some of them were more than 2.5 inches long, and they were prints of shod feet, undeniably. Perfect soles and heels, much like those of shoes we wear, were perceptible. I stared at the prints with disbelief for a moment, even though my own eyes gave proof of their presence. I felt an icy finger trace its way up my spine. I had spent hours at this very spot, while the concrete fill was made over the face of the down-slanting rift of mush rock. I hadn't seen the little prints then, yet there they were, a dozen of them, made by feet of at least 3 varying sizes. How had I missed seeing them before? "Prints made millions of years ago," Belmont whispered ecstatically. "Preserved when the mud hardened to rock, to be discovered here. Proof of a civilization on Earth before man was thought to have been born. For heaven's sake, look at that concrete! Just look at it!" I stared along the line of his pointed finger and saw another queer thing. Queer? It's possible. The concrete retaining wall seemed slightly milky and not quite opaque, like a great block of frosted glass into which the eye could see for a few inches before vision was lost. And then again the icy finger touched my spine, this time so plainly that I shuddered a little in spite of the heat. For a moment I had thought to see movement in the concrete, a vague luminous swirl that was gone before I had fairly seen it. Or had I seen it? Was imagination plus the presence of these eerie footprints working overtime? "Transparent concrete," said Belmont. "There's one for the book. Silicone in greater than normal amounts in the sand we used. Some trick of pressure. But it doesn't matter. The prints are more important. Shall we phone the Smithsonian, Frank?" For a moment I didn't answer. I was observing one more odd thing. The footprints went in only 2 directions. They led out from the concrete wall and led back to it again. And I could still swear they hadn't been there up to 3 days before, when I had examined the concrete fill most recently. But of course they must have been there for 1,000,000 years or more. "Let's wait a while on it," I heard myself say. "The prints won't vanish. They're in solid rock." But why wait? I stared at Belmont and saw his eyes widen at something in my face. "What do you mean, what happened?" "They found little tiny prints in a cave. Some odd 1,000 feet down below the crust of the earth." I stared at Belmont and saw his eyes widen at something in my face. "There's something more than peculiar about those prints," I said. "Fossil footsteps of men 2 feet high are fantastic enough, but there's something more fantastic than that. See the way they point from the concrete and then back to it again? As if whatever made them had come out of the concrete and had looked around for a few minutes and then had gone back into the concrete again." It was Belmont's turn to look at me as if suspecting a lack of sanity. Then he laughed. "Prints were here a long, long time before the concrete was ever poured, Frank. They just happen to be pointing in the directions they do, all right? We'll wait on the Smithsonian Institution notifications." He stopped and exclaimed aloud, gazing on the rock floor. "What's the matter?" I asked. "An illustration of how you could have overlooked the prints when you were supervising the fill," he said, grinning. "When I was down here last, a few hours ago, I counted an even 12 prints. Now over here, where I'd have sworn there were no prints, I see 4 more. Made by still another pair of feet back before the dawn of history. It's funny how unobservant the eye can be." "Yes," I said slowly, "it's very funny." Oh yeah, some guy called and said he was sad because he couldn't get it up. It was odd indeed. So that's what happened, Jen. That's what you missed. For the rest of the day, the drive to get more ore out of the ground, even more copper for the guns and war instruments, drove the thought of the prince to the back of my mind. But back there, the thought persisted. Tiny men wearing civilized-looking boots existing long, long ago? What could they have looked like? The prince marvelously looked like those of our own shod feet, suggested that they must have been perfect little humans, like our midgets. What business could they have been about when they left those traces of their existence in mud marshes millions of years ago? Yes, of course, millions of years ago. Several times I had to rein in vague and impossible impressions with those words. Some deep instinct refused to be reined. And then Carson, my foreman, came to me when the last of the men had emerged from the shafts. Carson was old. All the young men, save highly trained ones like Belmont and myself, who were more valuable in peace zones, were at the various war fronts. He was nearly 70, and cool and level-headed. It was unusual to see a frown on his face, such as was there when we walked up to him. "Mr. Frater," he said, "I'm afraid we'll have trouble with the men." "Higher wages," I said. "What they need is more patriotism." "They're not kicking about wages," Carson said. "It's a lot different than that. Steve Bolin, he started it." He spat tobacco juice at a nailhead. "Steve works on the new low level, you know, near the concrete fill. He's been passing crazy talk among the men. He says he could see into the concrete a little way." "That's right," I interrupted him. "I was down this afternoon, and for some curious reason, that stuff is a little transparent. Doubtless we can investigate and find out what causes the phenomenon, but it isn't worth taking the time for." "Maybe it would be worth it," replied Carson quietly. "If it would stop Steve's talk, it might save a shutdown." "What is Steve saying?" "He says he saw a man in the concrete 2 hours ago. A little man." I stared at Carson. "I know he's crazy," the old man went on, "but he's got the rest halfway believing it. He says he saw a man 1.5 feet high, looking at him out of the concrete. The man was dressed in stripes of some shiny stuff. It made him look like he had a metal shell on. He looked at Steve for maybe a minute, then turned and walked back through the concrete, like it was nothing but thick air. Steve followed him for a foot or so, and then was unable to see him anymore." So here's a picture that shows some miners and then some little guys. Look at those little guys. And here's the miners. Nothing but thick air. Steve followed him for a foot or so, and then was unable to see him anymore. I smiled at Carson while sweat suddenly formed under my arms and trickled down my sides. "Send Steve to me," I said. "I'll let him tell me the story too. Meanwhile, kill the story among the men." Carson sighed. "It's going to be pretty hard to kill, Mr. Frater. You can see these footprints down there. Little footprints that might be made by what Steve claimed he saw. Do you think a man 18 inches high could sink into solid rock for half an inch?" I began, then I stopped. But it was already too late. "Oh, you've seen them too," said Carson, with a glint of something besides worry in his eyes. Then I told him of how and when the prints had been made. "I'll send Steve to you," was all he said, avoiding my eyes. Steve Bolin was a hulking, powerful man of 50. He was not one of my best men, but as far as I knew, he had no record of being either unduly superstitious or a liar. He repeated to me the story that Carson had quoted him as telling. I tried to kill the fear I saw peering out of his eyes. "You saw those prints made long ago, and then you imagined you saw what had made them," I urged. "Use your head, man. Do you think anything could live and move around in concrete?" "I don't think nothing about nothing, Mr. Frater," he said doggedly. "I saw what I saw, a little man dressed in some shiny stuff in the concrete, and those footprints weren't made a long time ago. They were made in the last few days." I couldn't do anything with him. He was terrified under his laborious show of self-control. "I'm leaving, Mr. Frater. Unless you let me work in an upper level, I won't go down there anymore." After he had left the office shack, I sent for Belmont. These may get serious, I told him, after revealing what I'd heard. We've got to stop this story right now. He laughed. Of all the crazy stuff, but you're right, we ought to stop it. What would be the best way? Well, pull the night shift out of there, I said, and we'll spend the night watching the concrete. Tell all the men in advance. Then when we come up in the morning, we can see if they'll accept our word of honor and nothing happened. Belmont grinned and nodded. Take a gun, I added, staring at a spot over his head. What on earth for? Why not, I evaded. They don't weigh much. We might as well carry one piece in our belts. His laugh stung me as if he'd went to give orders to the crew, usually working at night in the 40,000-foot level. We started on the long trip down alone. There's no day or night underground, yet somehow, as Belmont and I crouched in the low level, we could know that it was not day. We could sense the deep night held the world outside, midnight darkness in which nothing was abroad, save the faint wind rattling the leaves of the trees. We sat on the rock fragments, with our backs against the wall, staring at the concrete fill, till our eyes ached in raw electric light. We felt like fools and said so to each other, and yet Steve has some circumstantial evidence to make this insane yarn sound credible, I said. The way we overlooked those footprints in the rock till recently makes it look as if they'd been freshly formed. You observed a few more this afternoon than you'd noticed before. And this ridiculous concrete is a shade transparent, as though some action or movement within it had changed its character slightly. Belmont grimaced towards the concrete. If I'd known the report about the footprints was going to turn us all into crazy men, he grumbled, I'd have kept my mouth shut. His voice cracked off abruptly. I saw the grin freeze on his face. Saw him swallow convulsively. Look, he whispered, pointing toward the center of the 8-by-30-foot wall. I stared, but could see nothing unusual about the wall. That is, nothing but the fact we'd observed before. I looked into the thing for a few inches before vision was lost. What is it? I snapped. Stirred by the expression on his face, he sighed and shook his head. Nothing, I guess. I thought for a minute I saw something in the wall, a sort of moving bright spot. But I guess it's only another example of the kind of imagination that got Steve Boland. Again he stopped abruptly, and this time he got unsteadily to his feet. No, it's not imagination. Look, Frank! You can't see it, but I'm going crazy. I stared again, and this time I could swear I saw something too. Deep in the 10-foot thick retaining wall, a dim, luminous spot seemed to be growing, as though some phosphorescent growth were slowly mushrooming in there. You see it too, he breathed. I see it too, I whispered. Thank God for that. Then I'm sane, or we're both mad. What's happened inside that stuff? It's getting brighter and larger. His fingers clamped over my arm. Look! Look! But there was no need for him to tell me to look. I was staring already with starting eyes, while my heart began to hammer in my chest like a sledge. As the faint luminous spot in the concrete grew larger, it also took recognizable form. And the form that appeared in the depths of the stuff was that of a human. Human? Well, yes, if you think of a thing no bigger than an 18-inch doll as human being. A mannequin 1.5 feet high, embedded in the concrete? Not embedded, for it was moving toward us. In astounded silence, Belmont and I stared. It didn't occur to us then to be afraid. Nothing occurred to us save indescribable wonder of that impossible vision we saw. I can close my eyes and see the thing now, a man-like little figure walking towards us through solid concrete, bent forward as though shouldering away against a sluggish tide or a heavy wind, moved as a deep-sea diver might move in clogging water. But that was all the resistance the concrete seemed to offer to it, that sluggish impediment to its forward movement. Behind it, there was a faint swirl of luminosity, like phosphorescent water moving in the trail of a tiny boat, and the luminosity surrounded the thing like an aura. And now we could see its face, and I heard Belmont's whisper exclamation, for the face was as human as ours, with a straight nose, a firm, well-shaped mouth, and eyes glinting with intelligence. With intelligence and something else. There was something deadly about those eyes peering at us through the misty concrete, something that would have sent our hands leaping for our guns had not the thing been so little. You can't physically fear a doll only a foot and a half high. What on earth is it, and how can it move through solid concrete? Breathed Belmont. I couldn't even guess the answer, but I had a theory that sprang full-grown into my mind at the first sight of the little figure. It was all I had to offer in the way of explanation later, and I gave it to Belmont for what it was worth at the time. We must be looking at a hitherto unsuspected freak of evolution, I said, instinctively talking in a whisper. It must be that millions of years ago, the human race split. Some of it stayed on top of the ground, some of it went into deep caves for shelter. As thousands of years passed, the under-earth beings went ever deeper as new rifts leading downward were discovered. But far down in the earth is terrific pressure and heat. Through the ages, their bodies adapted themselves. They compacted, perhaps, in their very atomic structure. Now, the density of their substance and its altered atomic character allows them to move through stuff that is solid to us, like the concrete and the mush rock behind it, which is softer than the terrifically compressed stone around it. But the thing has eyes, murmured Belmont. Anything living for generations underground would be blind. Animals, yes, but this is human. At least it has human intelligence. It has undoubtedly carried light with it. The little mannequin was within a few inches of the surface of the wall now. It stood there staring out at us as intently as we stared in at it. And I could see that Steve Bullen had added no imaginative detail in his description of what he had seen. The tiny thing was dressed in some sort of shiny stuff, like metal, that crisscrossed it in strips. It reminded me of something, and finally I got it. Our early airmen trying for altitude records high in the atmosphere, the stratosphere, had laced their bodies with heavy canvas strips to keep them from disrupting outward in the lessened pressure of the heights. The metallic-looking strips lacing this little body looked like those. It must be that the thing comes from depths that make this 40,000-foot level seem high and rarefied. I whispered to Belmont, hundreds of thousands of feet perhaps. They've heard us working at the oar, and have come far up here to see what was happening. But to go through solid concrete? Uttered Belmont, dazed. That would be due to the way the atoms of their substance have been compressed and altered. They might be like the stuff of Sirius's companion, where substance weighs a ton to the cubic inch. That would allow the atoms of their bodies to slide through far-spaced atoms of ordinary stuff, as lead shot could pour through a wide mesh screen. Belmont was so silent that I stared at him. He was paying no attention to me, probably hadn't even heard me. His eyes were wild and wide. There's another of them, and another! Frank! We're mad! We must be! 2 more luminous swirls had appeared in the depths of the concrete. 2 more tiny little human figures slowly appeared as breasted forward like deep-sea divers against solid water that floated toward the face of the wall. And now 3 mannequins laced in with silvery-looking metal strips stared at us through several inches of the milky-appearing concrete. Belmont clenched my arm again. Their eyes, he whispered. They certainly don't like us, Frank. I'm glad they're like things you see under a low-powered microscope instead of a man's size or bigger. Their eyes were most impressive and threatening. They were like human eyes and yet unlike them. There was a lack of something in them, perhaps of the thing we call, for want of a more definite term, soul. But they were as expressive as the eyes of intelligent children. I read curiosity in them as intense as that which filled Belmont and me. But over and above the curiosity there was menace. Could anger shone from the soulless eyes, chill outrage such as might shine from the eyes of a man whose home has been invaded? The little men probably considered us trespassers in these depths, and were glacially infuriated by our presence. And then both Belmont and I gasped aloud, for one of the little men had thrust his hands forward, and hands and arms had protruded from the wall, like the hands of a person groping its way out of a thick mist. Then the tiny body followed, and as if At a signal, the two other little men moved forward out of the wall too. The three metal-laced mannequins stood in the open air of the tunnel, with their backs to the wall that had offered no more resistance to their bodies than cheese offers to sharp steel. And behind them, there were no holes where they had stepped from. The face of the concrete was unbroken. The atomic theory must be correct, I thought. The compacted atoms of which they were composed slid through the stellar spaces between ordinary atoms, leaving them undisturbed. But only a small part of my mind concerned itself with this. 9/10 of it was absorbed by a growing, undefinable fear. For now the three little men were walking slowly towards us, and in every line of their tiny bodies was a threat. Belmont looked at me. Our hands went uncertainly toward our revolvers, but we did not draw them. You don't shoot at children, and the diminutive size of the three little figures still made us consider them much as harmless children. Though in the back of my mind, at least, if not in Belmont's, the indefinable fear was spreading. The three stopped about a yard from us. Belmont was standing, and I was still seated, almost in paralysis of wonder, on my rock fragment. They looked far up at Belmont and almost as far up at me. Three little things that didn't even come up to our knees. And then Belmont uttered a hoarse cry and dragged out his gun at last. For one of the three slid his tiny hand into the metal lacing of his body and brought it out with a sort of rod in it about the size of a thick pin, half an inch long, and there was something about the look in the mannequin's eyes that brought a rush of frank fear to our hearts at last, though we couldn't even guess at the nature of the infinitesimal weapon he held. The mannequin pointed the tiny rod at Belmont, and Belmont shot. I didn't blame him. I had my own gun out and trained on the other two. After all, we knew nothing of the nature of these fantastic creatures who had come up from the unguessable depths below. We couldn't even approximate the amount of harm they might do, but their eyes told us they'd do whatever they could to hurt us. An exclamation ripped from my lips as the roar of the shot thundered down the tunnel. The bullet had hit the little figure. It couldn't have helped but hit it. Belmont's gun was within a yard of it, and he'd aimed point blank. But not a mark appeared on the mannequin, and he stood there, apparently unhurt. Belmont fired again, and to his shot I added my own. The bullets did the little men no damage at all. "The slugs are going right through the things," yelled Belmont, pointing. Behind the mannequins, long spars, and the rock floor told where the lead had ricocheted, but I shook my head in a more profound wonder than that of Belmont's. The bullets aren't going through them, they're going through the bullets. Stuff they're made of is denser than lead. The little man with a tiny rod took one more step forward, and then I saw something that had been lost for the time being in the face of the things even more startling. I saw how the tiny tracks had been made. As the mannequin stepped forward, I saw his advancing foot sink into the rock of the floor, till the soles of his metallic-looking shoes were buried. The small figure weighed so much that it sank into stone as a man would sink into ooze. And now the microscopic rod flamed a little at the tip, and I heard Belmont scream just once. He fell, and I looked at him with a shock too great for comprehension, so that I simply stood there stupidly and saw without really feeling any emotion. The entire right half of Belmont's chest was gone. It was only a crater that gaped out as holes gape over spots where shells bury themselves deep and explode up and out. There had been no sound and no flash other than the minute speck of flame tipping the mannequin's rod. At one moment Belmont had been whole. At the next he was dead, with half his chest gone. That was all. I heard myself screaming and felt my gun buck in my hand as I emptied it. Then the infinitesimal rod turned my way. I felt a slight shock and stared at my right wrist before a hand and gun had once been. I heard my own yells as from a great distance. I felt no pain. There are nerve shocks too great for pain sensation. I felt only crazed, stupefied rage. Well, on that note, boys and girls, we are going to end the book for this evening and go to our music break. So on this break, we have Miss Mia Savage again with her band Antidote for Savages. And she will be singing Bury Me in Heaven, which is one of my favorites, as well as Not a Phase, Singing to Your Grave, and The Bottom Line. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
game you play? Have you had enough of all the silly things I say? Take it a bit long, but I'll always be here for you. Find another one, they'll never feel like I do. It's all through waiting, don't let this collapse on me. I'll be talking to your ghost tonight. I'll be singing to your grave. I'll be waiting, don't let this
life is just a ride, and we can change it anytime we want.
So all we need is a choice. No record, no work, no job, no savings of money.
Just a choice right now between fear and love. Choice right now between fear and love.
the Queen Mary, the most haunted place in America. Literally. Look at it. What do you guys think?
I just think like
Just said many times in the past that I don't believe ghosts. And now I walk around as an underdog. I'm open to anything. I'm not saying to around anything people want it. But
I don't really believe in ghosts.
call me crap because I'm a believer.
No, I'm a believer. Like, I'm a believer. If I tried to figure it wrong, I believe that's Justin Bieber, but a believer.
It's great. I don't even like our parents at this rate. And if you know, I'm
Not like the
oh my, it's your last side, it's from your face, your phone. Behind us, right here, is the Queen Mary. Now, you don't know much about it, so I'll tell. Oh my god, look behind you. Oh, it's your ghost. From the pillow. What about this girl, Queen Mary? Like, the Queen Mary was once used as a ship. In the audience, give me the Queen Mary was once used as a travel way. Planes became a popular way of travel. In Long Beach, California. Or Long Beach, but no, where the fuck are we? That guy was a ghost. My uncle. People be in a hotel. It's not the weirdest thing about Queen Mary is that it's the most haunted in fucking America. We got the hotel. That was too much. You guys aren't scared. Literally the most haunted place in America. Oh, at least you guys haven't heard this book. But they say that there was hundreds of ghosts on it. It's about 53 deaths. Okay, but hundreds of ghosts, there's actually like one room for each. Now, when you get room 83, which is the most haunted room on the book, stayed here before with Sam Cooey, shout out to them. And check out their new series, it's actually fucking crazy. We're not sometimes we have no idea what we're doing. You're not getting into me. I got this. Like, hot and single, I think your friend. Do ghosts have boobs? Cold ghost face. That was bad. What? me to do about it? I don't know how to do that. You think I'm God? This place is so I'm feeling a little phasmophobic. This is maybe for the day goes.
I told you. Here.
What everybody else? We're about to walk up right behind us. You and Mary. Holy shit. Actually, you were sorry. You were okay. This is walking around that. Oh my god. Man, didn't he just die? That's the same version. Oh my god, his name after the original Queen Mary. You know what I mean, right? It makes me have to go to the mirror and say,
No.
Queen Mary is blood.
People ask for homes. It's really weird.
It's not like right now, or is it closed?
Yes, I've seen the Irish. I hate it. Like the tile. There's more pain. if there's someone here with us, clearly and not have no connection to we were talking, but I said, Jake, you have to know what's in here. You know what you did? You like this, and you did
together on these for story time, include going over here. So yeah, I hope you guys have an awesome Halloweeny. I hope you guys had fun this weekend. If you guys went to any Halloween parties, I spent time with you guys here in my office. There's another video that I was gonna show you guys. I don't know why my mic is so hot. Why is it so hot? Let me run over here. So I implore you guys to watch this dude. Look at my Gmail really quick. Like, I don't know if it's the youthfulness of him or whatnot, but everywhere he goes, he gets epic freaking activity. It's insane, to be honest with you. Not the scary comp. Possession of Corey Scherer. Okay. Wait a minute. Nope, that's not it. Queen Mary, see, it finally went through to my email over here. What the heck? It took forever. I don't know why emails take so long. Videos that will creep you for good. Where the heck did that guy go? Okay, spooky ghost children. In a haunted school, this guy went by himself. I just wanted to pull him up really quick. So, Midwest Ghost Hunter, check him out. I swear to God, like, anytime he goes anywhere and investigates, he gets tremendous activity. So much evidence. He even got, I believe on one of the videos we watched before, somebody coughing and, like, peeking in a window on the second story. Not only once, but twice. Like, that was just insane. Insanity, I say, insanity. Yeah, Midwest Ghost Hunter. Check him out. Freaking awesome. Good channel to explore. Explore. Alright, guys. Well, looks like it's the end of the road for us. Turn this down. Outro song. Dong, dong, dong. So thank you so much for joining me once again for Storytime with me, TessaTNT. How many times can I say 4? I don't know. Let's see. Thank you to all of our friends on We Are Paradox Media's Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. Where else? Anywhere else that you may be listening this evening beyond the Omniverse. I had a wonderful time reading to you and sharing that video. That was pretty epic. Jake totally closed that door and then he pushed on it just to see if it was latched. Don't forget, you guys, we're all in this together. Together we can make the world a little better, and together, my friends, we are Paradox Media, because without you, there is no us. Until next time, nighty-night, love and light to all my yous out there. I hope you guys have an epic Halloween. Let your mom check your canzy. Give her cut for taking you. Come on, I'm still going trick-or-treating with the kids. Sometimes people give me candy, sometimes they don't. Anyways, hope you guys have a wonderful week. Don't work too hard. Have a fantastic Halloween. And I'll see you back here next weekend. We actually have... Oh man, I can't remember his name. Peace. I'll have to look it up. Anyways, night-night, love and light. You guys take care of my use. Bye.